Richard Furman, one of the greatest orators the Baptist denomination has ever produced, was a man that was such an able speaker that during the Revolution, he wanted to fight. They persuaded him to go town to town, and he could go into a town in the morning and turn the town from Tories to Whigs by the end of the day with public speaking on standing for the cause. He was just an amazing orator. Then you have the Catoctin Association pop up, and then it just continues on. So when the separate Baptists traveled south and all of that, they had been influenced by associationalism, and so the logical thing to do then by then is you start an association. So the Sandy Creek Association started, and the first camp meeting, if I can remind you, on American soil was in conjunction with the first meeting of the Sandy Creek Baptist Association. So it was not the American camp meeting wasn't started by the Methodists in the 1800s in Kentucky. It was actually started by the Baptists and was a result, and just kind of became a camp meeting as in 1758 as a result of the first separate Baptist Association meeting there. And that's the one where Jamie Ireland killed his horse riding there, and Samuel Harris got ordained, and all kinds of neat things happened. And the historians tell us that our Reverend Old Father gave us many solemn charges to stand fast unto the end. Amen. Shubal Stearns. So that's kind of where associationalism came from. And so, but when you look at America, I've always said this, and I think you guys will largely agree with me as you look back, that fellowships will become associations. Associationalism always tends towards conventionalism. Conventionalism always ends up in apostasy. And then you start over with another fellowship and it runs the same exact course. And so we can look back and be able to see that. And so I just wanted to share that because people ask me, should they have done it? Should they not have done it? When it comes to the Virginia Baptist General Association, I think it was important for them to say we are all one unified group. So when they put their names to petitions and they begin to try to work through the laws in the Virginia colony, they could say this is not just one bad pastor or three bad pastors in scattered churches. We have churches all over. And it basically forced those politicians to listen to them because they had the numbers to actually make a difference in their political careers. And so in that sense, I guess that was maybe a needed thing. But we will say a lot of things, and I try to lay it out. I'm probably overly protective of not giving just one side of a narrative. So some of you will even say, that guy sounds like a hyper-Calvinist. I'm the farthest thing from it. But I do want to do justice to the historical record. And a lot of times you got to understand what we're talking about is we're talking about the way it was just like this aisle right here. All this side over here is Calvinist, and all this side over here is Arminian. And there's nobody in the aisle right now. Well, I'm in the aisle, I guess, amen, but there's another one. Everybody's jumping up the aisle. But you understand that's how they frame the argument. So a lot of times what we're talking about is we're not talking about strong Arminian, you can lose your salvation versus, 2-seed Daniel Parker doctrine. We're talking about sometimes, like for example, I was telling Brother Paul this morning, Brother Isaac McCoy, whom we all appreciate, the greatest friend the American Indian ever had, bar none, who spent his life securing the Oklahoma Territory so they wouldn't go out of existence, took 13 trips to Washington on horseback to persuade the House and Senate for a plan of colonizing them, rode his horse through the wilderness, and these guys were amazing. There were times Isaac McCoy would lose his horses with his buddy in the middle of the night. They'd wake up next day, spend 3 days in the wilderness of Indiana or Ohio looking for their horses. They'd run out of food by the time they found their horses. Took 2 more days to find a trail. And by the time they got even close to where they're going, they're drinking out of mud puddles and trying to catch critters to eat. Eating boiled turtle eggs and stuff like that. We have no idea. But he was a Calvinist in his soteriology. Now listen, Baptists were never Calvinists in reference to ecclesiology. And pure, unadulterated Calvinism at its root is state churchism. You've got to understand that. Knox, Zwingli, Calvin, Luther, Melanchthon, all of them took Catholicism, took a step out of it, backed in their own corner and started their own state church because that's what they were trained in. So there are a lot of Baptists that got into Calvinism in reference to their soteriology. We're recognizing the accomplishments and things they did and saying they were noble men. I may not agree with that necessarily, what they believed on salvation. I want to try to bring out the accomplishments they did make. So my point of Isaac McCoy is he named his son John Calvin. Okay? What do you do with that? Well, he accepted. That's what he did. Okay? That's what he thought. That's what he's trained in. But if you read his early record in his daddy's church, he stood against his hyper-Calvinist dad. Let that mull around your mind there for a little bit. Okay.